Krishna, 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 Hey. Krishna, 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 Hey. Krishna, 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 Rakshamam. Krishna, 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 Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. So, description of the Ras dance, which is chapter number 33. Sukadev Goswami has used the word Shadanvita. That's where we're beginning. And this is basically what we've been reading for the last couple of weeks, is an explanation of how transcendental Krishna's Ras dance is, how it's in no way mundane activity. So I'd like to have some devotees volunteering to read. Jay Prakash Prabhu, would you like to start us off?
Sukadev Goswami has used the word Shraddha Navita for one who is trained in spiritual life. Shraddha, or faith, the beginning. One who has developed his faith in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Spirit Soul, can both describe and hear the Rasa Leela. Sukadev also uses the word no, I can't pronounce this one.
Anushrunayat.
Anushrunayat. Thank you. One must hear from the disciplic succession. Anu means following, and Anu also means always. So one must always follow the disciplic succession, not hear from any stray professional reciter, whether a Mayavad or an ordinary man. Anushrunayat means that one must hear from an authorized person who is in the disciplic succession and is always engaged in Krishna consciousness. When a person hears the Rasa Leela in this way, the effect will be sure. He will be elevated to the highest position of spiritual life.
Thanks, Prabhu. So Sukadev Goswami, of course, is answering Maharaj Parikshit's question about because the gopis thought of Krishna as an ordinary boy rather than the Supreme Lord, then how is it different if any girl thinks of any ordinary boy with a lusty desire? And then Sukadev Goswami is kindly answering how Krishna is not an ordinary boy, even though he appears that way, and the gopis are also not ordinary, even though their pastimes may appear that way. And he's in detail explaining Prabhupada is word by word explaining the meaning given by the explanation given by Sukadev Goswami. So, so first one has to have faith that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's said here. And one can get that faith from following someone who also has that faith. So basically one shouldn't hear from a Mayavadi or someone who is an impersonalist, someone who doesn't have faith that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Where is the faith of the Mayavadi? Their faith is that that all of the pastimes of Krishna are not real, they're Maya. So the Mayavadi believes that Maya is greater than Krishna, that illusion is greater than Krishna. They believe that Krishna is illusion, that's their understanding. But that's not possible actually. How can Maya be more powerful than Krishna? It means that they're devotees of Maya. Mayavadis are devotees because they think that Maya overpowers Krishna, which cannot be possible. Which means they misunderstood what the Rasa Leela is all about. They misunderstood what Krishna's pastimes or Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita are all about. So really we should follow those who have faith in Krishna. faith in Krishna's teachings and Krishna's pastimes. And that way it says that our spiritual life will be effective. Okay, we'll continue reading them.
Sukdev Goswami uses two specific words, Bhaktim and Param. Bhaktim Param means execution of devotional service, above the neophyte stage. Those who are simply attracted to temple worship but do not know the philosophy of bhakti are in the neophyte stage. The sort of bhakti is not the perfectional stage. The perfectional stage of bhakti or devotional service is completely free from material contamination. The most dangerous aspect of contamination is lust or sex life. Bhakti Param, devotional service, is so potent that the more one advances in this line, the more he loses his attraction for material life. One who is actually deriving benefit from hearing the Rasalila dance surely achieves the transcendental position. He surely loses all traces of lust in his heart.
Thanks, Prabhu. So every pastime throughout the Bhagavatam has something called the Shrutta Phala, the benefit of hearing. Or it has every pastime that we hear gives us a blessing in disguise. We hear people talk about this, isn't it? Blessing in disguise. Oh, that was a blessing in disguise. Yeah. So actually just reading Krishna book, just reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we get so many blessings in disguise. And at the end of each pastime is told what the blessing is. Yeah. So by hearing this pastime of the Ras Leela, there's a specific blessing we get, which is we advance in spiritual life. It's been mentioned a few times here. How do we advance in spiritual life? Because lust is removed from our heart. Ordinary people, they like to hear lusty stories. Yeah. You see Bollywood films, they're all movies about, lusty exchanges. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, etc. Yeah. So Krishna's stories are not like that at all. See, you're hearing Bollywood stories or reading or watching these kind of stories, the lust increases in the heart because we become attached to the people in the stories, the personalities. So we've become affectionate to those people who we're watching, and that's how movie stars are born, isn't it? Such and such played a great role in the film, such and such did, such a great scene in the film, and they become very famous. Yeah. So people become attached in that way to mundane personalities and the mundane life. Yeah, and we chase after these things by becoming attached to them. But instead, if we become attached to Krishna, Krishna's teachings, Krishna's pastimes, or if we become attached to the Ras Leela, we become free from lust. Yeah? Even though Krishna's pastimes are seemingly like what is the basis of like Bollywood movies and so on, actually they're completely transcendental, as we've been understanding from so many weeks of reading now. And the Shrutta Phala, the blessing, is that we actually become free from lust, because who is attachment going to be for when we hear these pastimes? Krishna. So then how can we develop lust, material lust, if we become attached to Krishna and hearing his pastimes with the gopis? So the two things are opposite, lust and love. Actually, they're opposite. So the more lust is removed, the more we move towards love. That's how we make spiritual progress. It's said here. So this is like the perfectional stage of bhakti, bhakti param. Yeah. Okay. So if anyone has questions and comments, just feel free to speak and ask.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry, I just have one question with this paragraph. Is that it's saying know the philosophy of bhakti. So is the philosophy of bhakti because we're reading this for argument's sake, I mean, for an example, and we read Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or whatever scriptures, and one may forget due to whatever that person is, may forget everything or most of it or some of it, what we've heard or learnt or understood.
Yes.
And then the next bit is the devotional service. So one may not forget how to perform devotional service, like temple worship, it says here.
Yeah.
But one will forget the philosophy. It's not philosophy, is it? It's, well, I don't know what it is. One forgets what it said in Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. Then what stage? What does that make that person? Or how do we get
So
to that?
what is being explained? It says here, those who are simply attracted to temple worship, but do not know the philosophy of bhakti, are in the neophyte stage. Yeah. So we have many people coming to our temples, many types of people. Yeah, isn't it? People come in with different motivations, different desires, different needs, different prayers from Krishna. They ask from Krishna different things based on the desire. So all of these different types of people, because they don't have desire for bhakti, for devotional service, they're considered as neophyte, which means beginner. They're beginners in the spiritual life. Beginner because they're coming to Krishna, so their spiritual life has begun. Because instead of going somewhere else, they're coming to Krishna. Instead of trying to work hard to please some materialistic person, they're coming to Krishna to please Krishna. But the understanding isn't complete. The understanding is if I please Krishna, I'll get what I want. And that's different from bhakti, because bhakti is all about, I want to please Krishna. For what? For what he wants. For his own pleasure. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's the basis of the bhakti philosophy, that we're all actually spirit souls. We're all part and parcel of Krishna. By serving our master Krishna, then that is the perfection of our existence, of our life. That's our philosophy in a nutshell. That's basically what takes us to the next stage. Understanding that, remembering that every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, we think we are our body and we have to take care of our material life's needs. And in order to do that, then we should pray to Krishna and he will make us happy in this material world. But that's not our bhakti philosophy. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions? Okay, Prabhu, you could continue reading then.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that according to Bhagavad Gita, Brahma's day and Brahma's night are periods of solar years expanding to 4.3 million multiplied by 1,000. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Rasa dance was performed during the long period of Brahma's night, and the gopis could not understand that in order to fulfill their desire, Krishna extended the night to cover such a great period of time. One may ask how thus was possible, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reminds us that Krishna, although bound by a small rock, could show his mother the whole universe within his mouth. How was this possible? The answer is that he can do anything for the pleasure of his devotees. Similarly, because the gopis wanted to enjoy Krishna, they were given exalted of chaste women. She doesn't live outside the association of her husband, and after reaching Ambikavana, the cowherd men of Vrindavan first bathed themselves in the river Saraswati.
I think you was skipped a page, maybe, Prabhu.
Have I?
So,
Oops, sorry. Yeah, I went to chapter 14. My mistake. He can do anything of the pleasure of his devotees. Similarly, because the gopis wanted to enjoy Krishna, they were given the opportunity to associate with him for a long period. This was done according to his promise. When Krishna stole the garments of the gopis while they were taking a bath at Chiragata on the Yamuna, he promised to fulfill their desire in some future night, in one night. Therefore, they enjoyed the company of Krishna as their beloved husband. But that night was not an ordinary night. It was a night of Brahma, lasting millions and millions of years. Everything is possible for Krishna, for he is the supreme controller. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 33rd chapter of Krishna, description of the rasa dance. Sorry for that. 2
No
pages
problem.
got stuck.
Appreciate your reading every week without fail. So we could have another reader to begin the next chapter. Because usually we have Jai Prakash Prabhu and Smita Mataji reading every week. So don't be shy if you'd like to read. I'd like to ask devotees to volunteer to read. We'll be here for reading together.
I can read.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. I think we discussed this paragraph already last week, didn't we? In quite some detail about the length of the Ras dance nights. Yeah. So we can move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 34, Vidyadhara liberated and the demon Sankajuda killed. Once upon a time, the coward men of Vrindavan, headed by Nanda Maharaj, desired to go to Ambikavan to observe the Shivratri ceremony. The Rasa Leela was performed during the autumn, and after the next big ceremony is Holi, or Dolyatra ceremony. Between the Dolyatra ceremony and the Rasa Leela ceremony, there is an important ceremony called Shivratri, which is especially observed by the Shaivites, or devotees of Lord Shiva. Sometimes the Vaishnavas also observe this ceremony because they accept Lord Shiva as the foremost Vaishnava. But the function of Shivratri is not observed very regularly by the bhaktas or devotees of Krishna. Under the circumstances, Srimad Bhagavatam states that Nanda Maharaj and the other coward men once upon a time desired. This means that they were not regularly observing the Shivratri function, but that once upon a time they wanted to go to Ambikavan out of curiosity. Ambikavan is somewhere in Gujarat province, and it is said to be situated on the river Saraswati. Yet we do not find any Saraswati river in Gujarat province, although there is a river named Savarmati. In India, all the big places of pilgrimage are situated on nice rivers like the Ganges, Yamuna, Saraswati, Narmada, Godavari, and Kaveri. Ambikavan was situated on the bank of the Saraswati, and Nanda Maharaj and all the other coward men went there.
Thank you. Any questions on this? So Dol Yatra is is Holy Day. Holi is also the same day as Gaurapunim in our Gaudiya Vaishnava calendar. Yeah. So sometimes multiple festivals, multiple events can happen on the same auspicious day. Yeah. So not only is we celebrating Gaurapunim, which is the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but we also celebrate Holi. Does anyone know what Holi is? Holi festival.
This Holi where when you the because Narasim not Narasim Dev Hiranyakashipu's sister,
Yeah.
She's the demon, and
Holika. That's right.
Holika, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that what we
That's right. So that's the festival of Holi, when she tried to, for the pleasure of Hiranyakashipu, she tried to burn Prahlad Maharaj, because she had this power of burning, So in doing that, she actually was herself burned because of the devotion of Prahlad Maharaj. Vishnu protected him. And so then that festival is celebrated as Holi. And of course, then there's the Dol Yatra, which is also on the same day. Dol Yatra is like basically Julan Yatra. So there's different swing festivals throughout the year. Yeah. Just as there's different Ras Leelas throughout the year. For example, there's also the Ras dance at the beginning of Kartik. Yeah. And then there's also the Ras Purnima at the end of Kartik as well. And then there's the Balaram Rasa Yatra, which is in the summer months. So similarly, there's also different Julan times of year as well. We just had Julan Yatra, which coincides with Balaram Punim. And then there's also Julan Yatra, which coincides with Gaur Punim. Okay, so no harm bringing that swing out again. And having another chance to swing the deities and sing. So in Mayapur, they have all of these festivals. I would assume also in Vrindavan as well, I'm sure, actually. I'm more familiar because of visiting Mayapur. They have the Shiva Ratri, then they have Holi, they have Dol Yatra, they have Gaur Punim. So all the festivals are celebrated there. And so Nanda Maharaj, he just had an interest in honoring Lord Shiva. The Vaishnavas can also honor Lord Shiva because he's the greatest Vaishnava himself. Yeah, we often hear that Prabhupada quotes Vaishnavana Mita Shambhu from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the greatest of the Vaishnavas is Shambhu. Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. Yeah. So Lord Shiva, he's the greatest Vaishnava. The river Ganges is the greatest river. Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest scripture. And Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the text in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Prabhupada quoting from. So other rivers are mentioned here as well. So out of all of them, the river Ganges is the greatest. And who is Ambika? Ambika is mentioned here because of this day. Because of this place, Ambikavan. Does anyone know who Ambika is?
Durga, Shiva's wife.
Yeah, that's right. It's another name of Lord Shiva's consort. Yeah. Okay. So this Ambikavan is a place, it's one of the vanas. It's a forest which is dedicated to Goddess Durga. Yeah. So let's continue reading.
They very devotedly began to worship the deity of Lord Shiva and Ambika. It is the general practice that wherever there is a temple of Lord Shiva, there must be another temple of Ambika or Durga, because Ambika is the wife of Lord Shiva and is the most exalted of chaste women. She doesn't live outside the association of her husband. After reaching Ambikavan, or the coward men of Vrindavan first bathe themselves in the river Saraswati. If one goes to any place of pilgrimage, his first duty is to take a bath and sometimes to shave his head. That is the first business. After taking a bath, they worship the deities and then distributed charity in the holy places.
Yeah, this reminds me of my spiritual master Jayapataka Swami. He frequently travels around the world, particularly in the, obviously the years prior to COVID and prior to his stroke. He would travel constantly, and he would follow this instruction very well. He would come back to Mayapur, which is his place of residence, and his first business was to go into the river Ganges. He would just love coming back to Mayapur and diving into the Ganges, and everybody would go swimming in the Ganges because he used to love coming back to Mayapur and doing that. So he would always take shelter of Ganga Mata in Mayapur, and they said also mentioned that one should shave their head when you go to the holy place. So that's how to become, externally clean. So you can be as clean as you can be externally, and internally, of course, purified by the Ganges. And then you can then enter the Dham. And you're also supposed to get the blessings of Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi, because they can remove the Maya, which covers the Dham from which covers our spiritual vision. Because Lord Shiva, he is the personality who is responsible for the mode of ignorance. And because we're under this mode of ignorance all the time, where we are living in the world, when we come to that Dham, the holy Dham, Vrindavan, Mayapur, Jagannath Puri, etc., then that ignorance needs to be removed. We need to first go to Lord Shiva and request Lord Shiva's mercy so that we can see the Dham for what it really is. Okay. So let's continue reading. Would anyone else like to read?
Oh, sorry, I was mute.
Were you
Didn't
on mute?
realize I was muted. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
According to the Vedic system, charity is given to the Brahmanas. It is stated in the Vedic Shastras that only the Brahmanas and the sannyasis can accept charity. The coward men from Vrindavan gave the Brahmanas cows decorated with golden ornaments and beautiful garlands. The Brahmanas are given charity because they are not engaged in any business profession. They are supposed to be engaged in Brahminical occupations as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Namely, they must be very learned and must perform austerity and penances. Not only must they themselves be learned, but they must also teach others. Brahmanas are not meant to be Brahmanas alone. They should create other Brahmanas also. If a man is found who agrees to become a Brahmana's disciple, he is also given the chance to become a Brahmana. The Brahmana is always engaged in the worship of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, the Brahmanas are eligible to accept all kinds of charity. But if the Brahmanas receive excess charity, they are to distribute it for the service of Vishnu. In the Vedic scriptures, therefore, one is recommended to give charity to the Brahmanas, and by so doing, one pleases Lord Vishnu and all the demigods.
Okay. Any questions on this paragraph? Or comments? So this is something that's to be done on any auspicious day, giving in charity. Yeah. So on this occasion of Mahashivratri, Nanda Maharaj, he gave this example of giving to Brahmins and sannyasis. So this gives us an interesting perspective of Vedic culture. What you find is it's so different to like the world we're currently living in. That charity now is generally given to people who are less fortunate, the poor and the needy, the homeless, the hungry. Yeah. But in the Vedic culture, it was actually that there wouldn't be any people who are needy. They would all be taken care of by the king. The king would be able to provide for all kinds of people. And charity was exclusively meant for brahmanas and sannyasis. So generally, it's understood when we read Vedic texts, we should know that when it says give in charity, it means to Brahmins. But these days, people think that means we can give to beggars, but that's not the case. Because the government is not employing people properly, therefore we have people in want of occupation, people in want of jobs, and so on, and they're struggling. And then it's left up to the common people to support them, which is better than, of course, not supporting, of course. It's not that we can neglect people, but it just shows how far away from the Vedic culture we are in the modern day. So, it's also said that if we can give to the Brahmins, it's like feeding Lord Vishnu. He says that, Lord Vishnu says that the Brahmanas are my tongue. Yeah. So if you wish to feed Lord Vishnu, then feed the Brahmins, they'll be happy. And Lord Vishnu will be happy. If Lord Vishnu is happy, then all the devas are also happy, because they're all like parts and parcels of his design, of his universal order. Okay, we'll continue reading unless anyone has questions.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Prabhu.
Hare
So
Krishna.
it's like, yeah, as you mentioned, the Brahmins are the tongue or the face of the Lord. So, and so we mentioned the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, part of the Lord's body. So, where do the Vaishnavas fit in? How would you describe that?
See that this is to do with one's occupation. Yeah.
Right.
So one has either occupation of a priest, which is Brahmin. Someone can have the occupation of a ruler, or someone who's a civil servant. Yeah, which is the occupation of a Kshatriya. One can be a merchant or business person, which is the occupation of a Vaishya. Or one can be a worker, which is occupation of a Shudra. Excuse me, my dry throat. So these are like worldly occupations, which is needed for the upkeep of society.
Sure.
Yeah, for kind of having a stable society. These are the 4 areas of society which need to be maintained well. Yeah. So the Vaishnav can be in any one of these categories. We will find examples of Vaishnavas, pure Vaishnavas, in any one of these groupings. It doesn't matter. Because the Vaishnav isn't in a social structure. Yeah.
Sure. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, bro. Thank you.
So we can think of maybe, can anyone think of some examples just to solidify this understanding? So any examples of Brahmins who are Vaishnavas in our history, in our spiritual tradition? Or any Kshatriyas who are pure devotees? Any Vaishyas who are pure devotees? Can you think of any examples? Or even Shudras who are pure devotees?
Ambrish
Hmm?
Maharaj.
Ambrish Maharaj, yeah. He was a
He was a Kshatriya and
Yeah.
a pure devotee of the Lord.
Okay, so we have a Kshatriya example. Any
Prabhu,
others?
Bhaktivinoda Thakur, My mind says he was a Kshatriya as well because he was a magistrate, and he was a Brahman because he was a Acharya, was writing books and preaching at the same time. So it seems like Bhaktivinoda Thakur was falling into two categories.
Yeah, it could be said that way. So the actually government was advised. Government advisors were also Brahmins. One example of that is Chandragupta's advisor. What was his name? Chanakya Pandit.
Chanakya Pandit, yeah.
Yeah. So even though he was a government official, he was actually a Brahmin because he was an advisor to the government. So a similar way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you can say he is like a Brahmin himself, although he held the position in government. You see.
Sure, sure. I mean, this is what I was thinking because Vaishnavas, because you mentioned the tongue of the Lord, the Vaishnava doesn't matter which occupational duty is materially, but because he's preaching, so he's like the tongue of the Lord, isn't he? Whichever, otherwise he might be doing a Shudra job, but if he's preaching, then he's like the tongue of the Lord as well. So he obviously is rising up to a Brahman and higher. The Vaishnavas are considered even higher than the Brahmins. So he has that position above the Brahmins as well.
Yeah. So the Brahmins are those who shouldn't be actually earning any money. They shouldn't have a salary. They shouldn't have a wage job.
Yeah.
That's what a Brahmin is. But
What about
they live by the donations of the service they perform. Yeah.
But a
So Brahmins, they're
Vaishnava,
normally priests. So then by doing their priestly duties, they get donations. And if they get extra donations, then they also give charity themselves. They never have more than what they need.
sure, thank you.
So that's the kind of Brahmin that's referred to as being the tongue of Vishnu.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
But of course, the Vaishnavas are also worthy of giving charity, no less. Yeah. I mean, Srila Prabhupada in his life, he was living the occupation of a Vaishya also, right? Prabhupada was a businessman. He had pharmacy companies and medical business, right? Pharmacies, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and all of that. So another example of a Vaishnava is so in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's someone who is a good example of a Shudra, but he's a pure devotee. His name has just escaped me. I just thought of it earlier. I've forgotten now. Yeah, it's just escaped me now. I had an example in mind. But even there's a story of Narad Muni. He meets a cobbler and a Brahmin. Has anyone heard that story before?
Yes, Prabhu. Very nice, Prabhu.
Yeah, and the cobbler, he proves to be a pure devotee. Yeah, and Lord Vishnu, he tells Narad Muni, go and ask the Brahmin, go and ask the cobbler, what do they think of my story that I'm putting an elephant through the eye of the needle. And then it was proven that it was actually the Shudra, the cobbler, who had pure faith that Lord Vishnu could do anything. Whereas the Brahmin, he couldn't understand it. He was trying to mentally trying to figure it out, and he couldn't figure it out. So he said that he was actually offensive to Narad Muni. He said that you're fake. And actually that proved his downfall. So these are different examples. Thanks for your question, Prabhu.
Thank you. I was just going to say, so this sort of proves the three modes as well, because the Brahmins may be in the mode of goodness, and because in the mode of goodness they tend to get arrogant as well because their knowledge, but that causes the knowledge causes their downfall. The knowledge is their influence as well at the same time, isn't it? Whereas the cobbler had pure knowledge or pure faith, he wasn't relying so much on knowledge, just like the Rajvasis. He was relying on his faith in the Lord and not too much speculation and questioning everything. Sometimes you can overthink things. So yeah.
Yeah, like Bhagavad Gita says, we're all born in these three modes of material nature. Yeah. So we have to act according to the nature we've been given. This is what Bhagavad Gita teaches us. So a Brahmin, he would naturally act in the mode of goodness. Yeah. Kshatriya would naturally act in passion. Vaishya is mixed with passion and ignorance, and then the Shudra is mixed, is in more majority in ignorance. But actually all the modes, they change in one's life. There's like a predominant mode of nature which we have, mode of activity, mode of working, thinking, which we have. Yeah. But they still get mixed. So even like the Brahmins in the Krishna book, we read some chapters earlier, they became proud, they became arrogant. So their mode of goodness, because it's not constant, it's not fixed, it became overcome by passion. Yeah, therefore they got angry. And then it again goes back to goodness when they realize their mistake. So none of these modes of nature in this material world are permanent. They're always changing, always shifting. So that's why the Brahmin is different from the Vaishnava, because the Vaishnava is in pure goodness, the Shuddha Sattva, which doesn't change. So the pure devotees, they're not influenced by the modes of nature, even though the pure devotees, they can act using the modes of nature. So how do we understand that? Someone who is who is not influenced by the modes, they can still use the modes of nature to act. Well, Arjuna is a good example of that himself, because Krishna tells him, what does Krishna instruct him to do ultimately in Bhagavad Gita? What does Krishna want him to, how does Krishna want him to act? In Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna want Arjuna to do ultimately on the battlefield?
Hare Krishna Babaji. Is it to fulfill his duty?
Yeah, he wants Arjuna to do his duty. He wants him to fight. Yeah. And so people misunderstand Bhagavad Gita also on this pretext, because although he's a pure devotee, he's not influenced by the mode of passion, which is why he doesn't want to fight anyway. But because he's got that ability, he uses it. He's got that mode of passion, he can use it. He's got that skill, he can use it in the service of Krishna. Therefore, it's pure devotional service. So we can either be controlled by the modes of nature, or we can control the modes of nature ourselves by rising above them. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely right, Prabhu. Thank you. Very good point.
So this is why the Vaishnava is different category.
Yeah, very good point, Prabhu.
Okay. Thanks for your question, Prabhu. So up to time now, it's 9 o'clock. Wow, that's gone fast. We had some nice discussions along the way there. So I'll just finish here. I'll just pause the recording here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.